Hi, my name is Mark.
Nobody cares.
If you've played guitar for people or in front of people, you've probably noticed some mixed reactions.
My ears.
Whether you're some kind of super shredder or a starting beginner, you may have noticed that people sometimes think that you're playing something really difficult or something really hard to pull off, and what you played or what you did was really an easy thing to perform, while many times you've been practicing a real hard song or a solo or working on your tapping and sweeping licks, and the people you're playing to are like,
Yeah, that's really cool, but can't you play insert generic pop song name here?
and that can be kind of a bummer really, arguing if you're playing the cool stuff or not, or if the people you are playing to can and should even acknowledge your hard work on guitar is another thing. And it's not what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share with you 10 tips that you can add to your guitar playing so that the people you're playing to can realize this guy's a real pro. But even though I'm sharing this with you, the really important thing is for you to practice.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
The reason I'm sharing these tips with you is so that you can impress the normies and beginner guitar players and the general audience you're playing to.
That's so very, very sad.
Sometimes these tips don't even add to the sound you're trying to go for. But they can definitely work when you're trying to impress people or trying to make yourself look like a pro. Before I give you these 10 tips, some things I would like to add for this kind of lesson thingy. You don't need to know any theory.
Oh, thank God.
I really do think you should learn theory, and I really think you should know how to apply it. By the way, I have a video about this subject that you can check out in the cards. It's called 5 Music Theory Concepts Explained for Guitar. Another thing I should add is that you don't need to be really proficient at guitar. You can be a starting beginner. The only things you should be able to do already are bar chords, but don't be too worried about it, keep watching the video. You should be able to play single note line stuff, without having all the other strings making noise along with it. It can help you out a lot to be able to sing while you play guitar, but it's not really strictly necessary.
Have you ever put butter on a Pop-Tart? It's so frickin' good.
And it can also be really helpful to be aware of the popular songs that are going on at the time you're playing.
Oh, hell no!
Again, you don't have to be able to do these things I mentioned before, but it helps out a little bit. Before we dive in, timestamps will be on the description. While you're down there, consider subscribing to my channel and turning on the notifications to stay notified of new videos. I also have other videos like this that you may want to check out, like how baby metal changed my songwriting. Or maybe 5 chord progressions that you don't really know how to play but you definitely heard before. And even perhaps music is kind of like food, and jazz is kind of like French fries and ice cream? All of those videos will be on the card section, right there.
Here's a phone. Call somebody who cares.
Before we get started, one thing I forgot to mention is some of these tips work on acoustic guitar as well. I'm using an electric mostly because I don't really own an acoustic, and also because, at least in my opinion, the electric guitar is much more comfortable than the acoustic guitar. Depends on the guitar you're playing, but yeah.
Please proceed, Governor.
So, tip number 1 is ease on the solos. People that aren't musicians really don't appreciate the mindless noodling or the crazy solos you can play or the crazy techniques you can employ. Regular people are more interested in songs.
That is blasphemous!
Who cares if you can play all the solos on every Steve Vai and Joe Satriani record if you can't play full songs? Not only in songs, but in songs that they know. But if you're playing a song right and they're confident enough, people will enjoy your performance whether they know the song or not. Knowing the song is just a little kind of icing on the cake. And since most songs are based on chords and melodies, you should really focus on chordal playing. Tip number 2. Another thing that can make you look like a pro is doing finger picking instead of playing with a pick. I can play most of what I can play with a pick with my finger. For instance, if I was going to play a chord with a pick, I can also play that chord with my fingers. I think the rationality with this thing is that since you have 5 fingers and you have one pick, playing with your fingers is more difficult than playing with a pick.
Walked into that one.
And that's debatable, really. By the way, if you want to learn more about picking technique, you can check out my video about the best picking technique ever, right there in the card section of the video.
We all sell out every day.
And if you think to yourself, well, yeah, but I haven't learned how to do finger picking, or I'm not that good at it, don't worry. I can share some tips with you right now.
Very nice.
One of it is, if you're playing chords like, I don't know, like a C chord, or a G chord, or even an E chord, try and leave your thumb for the lowest strings of the chord. For instance, if you have a C chord, the lowest note on that C chord is that C note on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, Another thing you may struggle with your finger picking technique is using your pinky finger. And while you're starting out, you'll probably feel that all of your fingers are pretty strong except that little finger. One exercise I can suggest to you is to do a bar on any fret, for instance in the 3rd fret, across all strings, and then you keep playing the lowest note with your thumb. Then your pinky finger will go up each string, and then down each string.
My fingers hurt.
And if you don't really practice it a lot, using your pinky finger will in general feel really awkward. But it's your job to practice it and making it feel as normal as possible. To practice finger picking in general, one thing that you can do is all the songs that you can already play with a pick, try playing them with finger picking. For instance, if you know Sweet Home Alabama, you would probably play it with a pick like... Try doing it with finger picking. My third tip to you, and this is really more aimed to experienced guitar players, don't really play fancy chords. And I know what you're thinking. If you're playing a fancy chord, people will probably think you're good and fancy, and that you know a lot of chords and techniques, but not really.
Say what?
There are exceptions, but in general, ease up on the crazy chords and fancy chords. I know most of you that play a lot of songs with 3 or 4 chords can get really boring, and one of the ways to make it more spicier and fun is, for instance, if you have a G major chord, trying to play G major 7. Or if you have a D minor chord, you'll probably play a D minor 7. And then trying to add all of those extensions like D minor 7 6th. I'm not saying don't learn it. It really depends on the situations and who you're playing to. But for what I'm trying to teach you in this lesson, don't really worry about crazy chords. My 4th tip is try to play chords that are instantly recognizable or that you can find in most songs. For instance, if I play this set of chords and I don't tell you which song they're from. You've probably heard those chords before, right? And they got a slight groove to them, and you can feel a certain vibe with them. For instance, if you try to play... those chords would work like in a jazz context. But in this context, you want to play the most poppiest chords, I guess. Another set of chords would be, for instance... So yeah, try to go for chord progressions like that. Or at least something that is recognizable. Or as I mentioned before, try to go for one of the top songs on the charts right now and play chords from a particular song. Trust me, there's probably a bunch of other songs with those chords on them. Tip number 5 is, you know those crazy bar chords like the F minor bar chord? Or the F major bar chord? One thing that you can do is instead of trying to play the full chord, try and play a portion of it. Like, you can play just the top 4 strings, like... It's much easier to do than this chord. This works for minor chords as well. One thing that's really popular right now, and that guys used to do back in the days like Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and now John Mayer as well, he's an Hendrix fan and Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, is to play the bass note of the chord with your thumb. And I know what you're thinking, this might sound really crazy for a beginner, or maybe you have small hands, but don't worry, just try to work it out. For instance, if you're trying to play this little chord here, there are 2 possibilities. You either have your thumb on the back of the neck, or you have it up here, right? Like when you play your C chord, you have your thumb right here, right? Push your thumb a little bit on that 1st fret right there, and you can play that F major chord again. And if you want to get a fuller sound and you don't really want to play that bar chord, because bar chords are for beginners, people say. The pros don't really need to do bar chords.
Big mistake. Big. Huge.
Add that little 5th in there, as if you had a bar chord. Then add your thumb back in. For instance, if you're trying to play the song we mentioned before, like... can use the same concept here. That's something you may want to try. Another thing you may want to add that will definitely make you look like a pro and that
Oh my god, it's so good it doesn't even need a band to accompany himself.
is to walk little bass lines. And again, this can get really complex and kind of out of the key you're playing, but in general and for what you're going to do, this will serve its purpose.
Okay.
A bass line is, for instance, if you're trying to go from B minor to D major, for instance, a bass line would be, and if you would try to go back would be, and since many of you are watching and don't know any theory to know what intervals you should use,
What a loser!
just walk to the root note of the chord, which in most cases is the lowest note that you have in your chord. Go up to it from 3 frets below. For instance, in the case of B minor like here. And it can kind of feel like you have a bass player accompany you. But who needs those losers anyway, right? And again, you can work that bassline thing along with using your thumb, like I showed you before, and going. It is in general pretty hard to do your bass notes on the A string and lower. It's really much easier to do it on the 6th string. But hey, you don't need to use your thumb in every chord, and you don't need to do that little bass line thing in every chord. For tip number 7, another thing you can do is slide your chord from a fret below. For instance, using that chord progression again. What I mean is literally slide off a fret below to the chord. And this sort of thing can be used while you're going for the chord for the first time, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Or it can be used at the middle of the bar or at the end of the bar. You can choose for yourself, like combining it with the walking bassline thing we had before. And unlike using your thumb or doing the bass lines, this one is pretty easy. Another cool tip, and this really is a fancy technique. But this is one of those techniques that people will actually think,
Wow, that was really cool. He must really know a lot or be a pro.
which is to either end on a harmonic note, and if you don't know what harmonics is, if you just touch the 12th fret on your guitar, don't really push your finger into the fret playing a note. Just touch it lightly, and then play that note. And you have harmonics all over their neck. And if you have a harmonic on one fret, you'll have harmonics on the other strings on that same fret. For instance, in this 12th fret. This one is the most prevalent one, but you can also find them on the 7th fret, on the 5th fret, but those are harder to play because they're not exactly over the fret and you gotta be really precise. This is again where the music theory aspect of it comes from, because if you're just playing a chord progression like, if you don't know any music theory, or you don't know your intervals or notes all over the fretboard, you may not know on what key that is. And if you end your song like, it really won't sound that good, will it? But if you end it, it will sound a little bit better, because we're playing in B minor-ish, and we're ending with a B harmonic. But the really fancy thing you can do, let's say for instance you're playing a song, and you're ending in G major, and you play this little G major chord. If you go 12 frets up, which in this case would be on the 15th fret, one thing that you can do, hover your finger on the 12th fret of the note you're playing, point your index finger to that fret, as if you were going to do it here, but do it on the 15th fret, and you will have a harmonic, right? Well, if you do that on every note of that chord, again, that may be as fancy as your tapping licks or your slip picking lick. It won't really matter to the people you're playing to.
No shit, Sherlock.
Another thing you can try and do, kind of as my last tip for you, is that if you use these techniques like if you're able to nail it, you'll probably look really cool. But one thing that will make you cooler is when people say,
Oh my god, that was really good. You're so talented. I'm such a pro.
even if you don't really know how to explain what you did, try to explain it to them. And if you say, oh, I'm just doing a walking bass line thing, and then I'm sliding the chords around, or I'm playing with my thumb because it makes it more comfortable, or it's much of a cooler sound, or whatever you say really. People will say, oh my god, he really knows what he's talking about. He's really a pro. And in general, unless you're talking to a musician, people will be really amazed at you. Not only because you can play something, but you can explain it. Even if you're not able to explain it really well, most people will not only not be able to understand it, and even if they do, many of them will really not care. Bonus tip. Even though this is a bonus tip, this is the most important one, and you should really pay close attention to this.
Well, we're waiting.
If you can't do any of these techniques, or people don't really think you're a pro, grab your pick back and play Wonderball.
I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now.
Thank you so very much for watching.
God, please, no! No!
I hope this video was helpful to you in any way possible. What? If I was able to help you out in some way, or have a suggestion for a video, or have something you'd like to add to the video, or perhaps some things I could improve on, please leave a comment below. I would really like to know your thoughts.
Oh, well, what if I said, well, if you... Yeah.
As always, I'm giving away free one-on-one Skype lessons.
Free?
And anyone can enter. But these lessons are limited though, so you gotta be fast. All you have to do to win one free Skype lesson and discounts on future lessons is to subscribe to my channel, turn on the notifications, like my Facebook page, and then follow me on Instagram. After that, DM me on one of those social media, with screenshots, proving that you did everything mentioned before.
Is that all you got?
And yeah, I guess that's it. Again, thank you so very much for watching, consider subscribing, and cheers. For reals though, don't take this video too seriously.